Hey, thanks for joining me right here in my little corner of the world. It is now 2025. Thank you for joining me. We start the year off great with a great guest. He was my very first guest. He's been on the program a few times. His name is John McCutcheon. We talk about his new album, Field of Stars, and so much more. We have so many great stories and great remembrances throughout this episode. So I urge you to sit down and give this a good listen or watch it on YouTube, wherever you get your lovely podcasts. This one is also available at talesfromthecorners.com, or you can look up TFTC with Bob Nebel, Nebel, wherever you get those podcasts. So I really hope you enjoy this. Happy New Year. Can't believe it's 2025. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you on the other side of this thing. Thanks for joining me. It's so great to see you again. I think this might be the fourth time on my podcast, my corner of the world here. So it's just great to see you back. And you are out now with your 45th album.
I know it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. You got some great origins with this album because you just shelved it for a bit. You know, the pandemic had happened and it was this little collection of gems and put them up on the shelf and unearthed and got together with people over Zoom. Tell us about the origins of getting this together.
Well, as you and your listeners know, I am a charter member of Overachievers Anonymous, cranking out 45 albums in a 52-year career. Um, I was on a tour in Australia in February and the first half of March of 2020, and I arrived back in the United States on March 16th, 2020, to a very different country than I had left, a very different world. And I had planned on recording a new album, had no name, not even a working name for it, but a bunch of songs that I'd accumulated. And I came back and I realized, oh, well, this isn't going to happen anytime soon. And I'd already booked studio time. I had the musicians hired, and so I said, well, we'll just put this on the shelf, and I'm sure in a couple of months when this is over, we'll be able to complete this. And as you well know, that wasn't the case. And as you also know, I kind of hit a creative stride during the pandemic and put out 3 albums. Well, wrote 4 albums, actually, 3 by myself. The first one, Cabin Fever, with just me and an instrument. And the next 2, my trusty studio band and I figured out, along with our engineer, how to record an album remotely that sounded like we were all in the same room. And the magician was really the engineer in that case. And I'd also been discovered that Zoom was a great way to do co-writing. I mean,
Yeah,
who knew?
absolutely.
Who knew about Zoom before the pandemic? And one of the people I started writing with early on was Tom Paxton. So last year when we talked,
Yeah.
that was the new album. And in fact, spoiler alert, we're going in the studio in March to do yet a second McCutcheon Paxton album. But when I was done with the Paxton album, I thought, well, I need to take these songs down and finally put out this album. And I looked at the collection of stuff, and some of them passed muster, and some of them I felt, well, this isn't as good as the kind of writing I've been doing since I came back from Australia. And there was also a bunch of songs that I have been writing with other people. I write with about 5 or 6 different people a week.
Wow.
That's
Wow. That's
because,
keeping busy. Yeah.
well, and it's all, I mean, you know, you know at the beginning of an hour that you're going to have something
Yeah.
uh, either finished or pretty close to finished, or sometimes, I mean, the worst of times is when we have a partial thing, and I'll say to one of my co-writers, okay, you take it and go mess with this, I'll go mess with this, and next week we'll see what we come up with, and sort of do a mashup. So there were a bunch of songs way more songs than I picked, that I thought, oh, I would love to get this song out there right
Yeah.
now. And they included a song, the title cut that I wrote with my dear friend Carrie Newcomer. And it's about walking the Camino de Santiago, which is something I'm going to be doing in May. And I can't imagine there won't be a whole bunch of songs that
Yeah.
come from that experience.
Oh, sure.
And then I've been writing with a wonderful young writer, Trent Wagler, who is the front man for a great band called the Steel Wheels out of the Shenandoah Valley. And Zoe Mulford and I have been writing for a long time, and she is an American expat living in Manchester, England. And we have at least an album of what I think are wonderful songs that we could do together. So I chose one of hers. And it also was an opportunity to because we've got this remote thing going now in recording, to sing with some of my favorite singers. Carrie joined me on the title cut Field of Stars. And then I have known the amazing bluegrass singer Claire Lynch from her days in the Front
Mm.
Porch String Band when she lived in Alabama. And we would show up at all the, here's,
Yeah.
imagine, I'm digressing.
That's
I was at a
okay.
festival
Yeah.
in Kansas, a festival I go to every year in Winfield, Kansas. Been going there for 40 years. And I was backstage, and this is early in Alison Krauss's career. And I have known Alison since she was a teenager playing in jam sessions on the Midway there. And she is all of a sudden starting to get some traction, and she and I are sitting backstage. I'm about to go on. She has just been on. And Claire Lynch walks in. And I hadn't seen Claire in a couple of decades. And I went over and I hugged her neck and
Yeah.
started talking as though Claire and Allison knew one another. And I said, y'all, y'all have met, haven't you? And they both said no. And I said, ooh, I want to have put on my gravestone that I introduced Alison Krauss and Claire Lynch. And they sang together the rest of the weekend at the festival. It was heavenly.
Yeah.
So Claire Lynch has long been a friend, so I invited her to do a duet, and then there's a wonderful group of young a cappella singers called Windborn that I
Yes.
just love.
Amazing
I
group.
just love their stuff. And we will get together at festivals, as you do, and I'll say, "Hey, come up and sing this song with me." And so when album closer, a song that I wrote as a table grace for my songwriting camps, I asked them to join me, and so it was a treat. I kind of indulged myself in this album because I've been waiting so long.
Yeah, and it really shows in that result, and it's just an amazing group. Just the harmonies, the acapella, it's really
Oh yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, you could tell that they put their 10,000 hours in of practice and really got it perfect. That's just, they make it look easy, but far from that. I'm sure it's just lots and lots of practice when you're trying to coordinate that much vocal together.
Well, and it doesn't matter whether you are a writer or an actor or an athlete. All the
Yes,
work that you
yes.
put into making something really pretty difficult look easy is the art in
Mm.
it. And it's the joy in it too. I mean, I'm vacationing at the South Carolina beach with a bunch of my family, and I was just goofing around making up songs about our dog with my grandkids last night. And it occurred to me, all those hours of practice were not about making albums. It was not about doing concerts. It's about being able to do exactly this. Make up goofy little songs with my grandkids about just things we see around in the world. And then they'll grow up thinking, well, this is just a natural part of life. And that's the best legacy I can ever hope for.
Yeah, how beautifully said. It really is. You're always working. This is beyond 24/7. It's just
Oh,
everything is a
well,
song.
and everybody,
Not really
all my
work.
compatriots who are, I went to school with or I grew up with, they're all retired now, and they'll say,
Yeah.
when are you going to retire? And I just think, I don't even know what that means, because
Yeah.
this is just something that happens all the time. And certainly, um, well, my friend Tom Paxton, for instance, just retired from the road. He had a couple of health issues, and he's 87 years old.
Yeah.
He's punched his clock,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
but he's still writing and still writing as great and better than ever. And you just think, wow, what a gift to be able to have a creative life your whole life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And just because you retired from the road, I mean, the mind is still working, and that's good for the mind. It's getting constant exercise. So, yeah, cheers to Tom Paxton for sure.
Well, I mean, he's just entering the same kind of world that we had during the pandemic. You know,
Yeah.
we're not going to airports, we're not going to hotels, and we're not missing it, really. I love playing, but I'll tell you, as soon as they perfect astral projection, I will turn in my Delta Diamond status in a heartbeat to just
Well,
go,
yeah.
okay, let's go to Seattle. See you in a few hours, honey.
Yeah, it's great for the fans. They benefit. But yeah, the traveling, while it's great to be able to see some sights and say, I've been all over the world, what a schlep, huh? It's just to take that equipment with you and the plugging in and setting up and all of that. It's got to be really tough.
Well, I'm having a new lightweight hammer dulcimer flight case built right
Yeah.
now, and I was talking to my roadie the other day, who's just a year younger than I am. We've been together for 35, 36 years. And I said, well, I think the new dulcimer case is going to be ready for for this tour. I have a tour coming up in California in a couple of weeks. And and I said, but I'll believe it when I see it. And he said, no, you'll believe it when I lift it.
I was thinking of the dulcimer. It's like, oh, how do you travel with that thing? Oh my gosh.
It's in a very heavy flight case from Georgia Case Company, great
Ah,
local business. But I'm ready for. It's funny. I was at a festival this last summer up in New York, and a fellow hammer dulcimer player was there, and he looked at me and he said, "This hammer dulcimer is twice as heavy as it used to be." And it's
yeah.
exactly the same one.
Gosh. Wow, it's just thinking about how you have to check things on and like what we were just talking about Peter Yarrow, who is we're all hoping and praying for him.
Bless his
But
heart. Peter is,
yes.
you know, yeah, yeah. I
They
mean,
they
it's
lost, Delta lost his beloved guitar. I think it turned up years later.
Well, yeah, we all have those stories. Tom Paxton, in fact, wrote a song called "Thank You, Republic Airlines,"
See?
for breaking the neck on my guitar. And I'm sure that song is the reason Republic Airlines went under. Um, but Peter Yarrow, yeah, Peter showed up at a concert I was doing in New York, and I saw him in the audience. And first of all, you were so honored when a fellow musician comes to one of your shows. And I can usually tell if there are fellow musicians there because after the first few songs, there'll be a pacing in the back because they're just not used to sitting down and
Yeah.
listening to somebody else play music. They're in a concert hall. They're supposed to be working. And I saw Peter and I said, I remember the day I discovered folk music. My
Yeah.
mother made me sit down. I was 11 years old. It was a Tuesday afternoon in 1963. And she made me sit down with her, this former social worker turned mother, and watch the March on Washington. And well, it was an eye-opening and a mind-opening and a heart-opening experience for everyone. But as a little 11-year-old kid, here was the biggest gathering in U.S. history up to that point, and there was preaching like I never heard in Sunday at my church.
Mm.
And then there was all this music, everything from Mahalia Jackson to Marian Anderson, and then there was folk music. And I'd never heard of folk music. And there was Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and Odetta, and then out came Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Yeah.
I remember I was just riffing at this show because I knew Peter was in the audience, and I said, and then these two guys in goatees came out, and I've
Yeah.
always thought goatees looked sinister,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and But there was this nice Nordic-looking girl. She could have been from Wisconsin, so I figured she was
Yeah.
okay. And they sang the Pete Seeger and Lee Hay song, "If I Had a Hammer." And I don't remember as much their singing of it as I remember the cameras panning the audience, and everybody was singing.
Yeah.
And it was
Incredible
clear
time.
to me from this whole event that this was not about self-aggrandizement. This was about being involved in something that was bigger than yourself, and it was about participation. And it was so different from the music I was hearing on the radio, whether it be, Chuck Berry or the Beatles or
Mm.
Elvis. It was all about them.
Yeah.
And this was all about us. And I just remember thinking, I want to be a part of that. And I and I looked
Big
at Pete
catalyst.
DeGarro in the audience, who came up and joined me for a few songs after this.
Oh.
I said, "And you've ruined my life.
What an
Thank you,
inspiration.
thank you so much for ruining my life." And everybody laughed. But yeah, Peter, talk about keeping a creative life and keeping a life that has some meaning beyond yourself. Peter's done that better than most. So,
Oh yeah, yeah. And he was just so accessible, and I kind of linked that with President Carter, who was just very accessible to the people and just didn't put himself above everybody else. He knew how to converse, and he was interested in what anybody had to say to them. I interviewed Peter years ago for an article before he was going on stage at Chastain and Chastain Park Amphitheater, and he's
mhm.
just, it was amazing. He was just, blends into the room very well, just like Jimmy Carter did. Just like didn't expect everybody to like stand up and stand at attention. Just, one of the common people. He never lost sight of that.
Well, and Jimmy was the first president, and certainly the first presidential candidate that had lots of music as a
Yeah,
part of his campaign. I mean, it was 1976, and all of a sudden, here's the Allman Brothers
exactly. Yeah.
and so many other musicians who are playing at his rallies, and you just think, well, this is completely different, and this is totally fun. And imagine 4 years of something like this. And there was that sense of approachability, and he's
Yeah.
a peanut farmer from Plains, for heaven's
Yeah.
sakes.
Yeah.
And such a different governor for Georgia in his time than we had seen prior to that.
Oh yeah, for
And you
sure.
just thought, this is a
Mm.
tide turning kind of person. And of course, when you look at other presidents, many of whom are just charging a whole lot of money to do speeches, you
Yeah.
got Jimmy and Rosalind out there building houses and monitoring elections and promoting human rights. And I mean, it's a model for how to be a consequential and open-hearted post-presidential persona. I mean, holy,
Yeah.
holy alliteration, Batman. Post-presidential persona. Yikes.
Oh, absolutely.
Stand back, Bob.
What an inspiration. And no,
Yeah,
you don't have to be the president. You don't have to do that. You could be regular citizen, whatever, and get out there and make change.
right.
And
And
oh, yeah.
he made that. And he taught Sunday school. You know,
Yeah.
he just he showed up.
Yeah.
Uh, he wasn't behind a wall. Um, he was just. I mean, the fact that people just called him Jimmy.
Yeah.
That you just have to say that name in Georgia, and everybody knows who you're talking about. It wasn't Mr. President, as you hear others say. It's Jimmy. You know,
Yeah.
quite a
Incredible.
man, quite a man.
Yeah. Yeah. We should all hope to be 100. Gosh, what it
If you're
is.
gonna if you're gonna if you're gonna live to be 100, let's hope you're able to fill your life with dignity and generosity and the kind of living out of faith that you don't see enough these days.
Hmm. Very, 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 very true. So you flash forward here, 45th album, you have a song called The Hammer, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
inspired by Georgia as well. And what a story there is behind that. And you know,
Oh, well, I wrote it
gosh,
the day Henry Aaron died.
yeah,
And, when I moved to Georgia, going on 20 years ago now, I'd grown up in Wisconsin. And I grew up with, I mean, Henry Aaron was a part of my consciousness from the time I had consciousness. He was he started with the Milwaukee Braves. We
yep,
actually started with the Indianapolis Clowns. And
yep,
then he went to the Eau Claire Braves. And then from there in 1954, and the Braves had only come to Milwaukee in 1953.
mm,
And this was a time, and his autobiography is called I Had a Hammer. So, he basically picked the title of the song for me. And this was a time when they hadn't figured out that they were going to have a major league team, so you could bring your own beer into the stadiums, and the Twins weren't in Minnesota yet, so the Braves were the team for Minnesota and the Dakotas, and it was right in the rail yards. County Stadium was right in the rail yards, and people would take the freight train,
oh
from
my
the
God,
Dakotas and come and take their cases of beer in his. And Henry said it was the happiest year of his major league career. He was a rookie. He was in a place that treated him well, and they said they were so happy to have the team that they would cheer if someone made a good effort, even if they didn't catch the ball.
what a
So
different time.
so when I moved to Atlanta, the three things that I really loved when I first came was after 35 years of connecting flights, direct flights everywhere. I was never going to be standing in the baggage claim area hoping that my instruments made that tight connection. The symphony. I'd never lived in a town with a
Yeah.
professional symphony, and I loved and continue to love and support the ASO. And and then I'd never lived in a town with a major league team of any level. The closest was when I lived in Charlottesville, I would go see the Richmond Braves, the AAA team at that
Right.
time for our Atlanta Braves. And I remember the first time I ever went into Symphony Hall, there was a world debut because Robert Spano was great about bringing young, up and coming composers in and doing world debuts of a baseball symphony in three movements. One movement dedicated to Jackie Robinson, one Henry Aaron, and one for Dave Parker. And all your
Hmm.
baseball fans are going, "Huh?"
Yeah,
I
that's
figured,
interesting.
well, Dave, guy must be from Pittsburgh, and it turns out he was, and he was a big Dave Parker fan. And so at the end of the performance, the composer came out, and everybody clapped, and then he motioned to the audience, and a spotlight shone 2 rows in front of me, and there was Henry Aaron. I
Oh, well.
was 54 years old at the time, and I burst into tears. I had, here was someone who meant more to me than I understood. And Henry was like Jimmy. He would
Yeah,
just
yeah,
be there. He
exactly.
was
Yeah.
out, he was doing things, he was appearing at different events. So I saw him many times since then, which only increased my appreciation and my admiration for the fellow. So when he died, um, I was just it's my particular kind of catharsis. It's what I do, and I wrote the song, and and had to get all baseball geeky in
Yeah.
the last verse, imagining, uh, you know, God figuring out the lineup for the team, which undoubtedly had to be called the Angels, and put all these different Hall of Famers at different positions, and
Wow.
Henry starting in right on his first day there. He's a rookie,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Beautiful song. He you mentioned about the hate mail that
oh yeah,
hate mail for a baseball player. To me, that when I first heard of that, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. People are just off the charts.
Well, this was 1974. It's a long time from 1947
Yeah,
when
yeah,
Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. Um, but you saw how that was still the case, and people
yeah.
wanted a white man to be the well. I remember the first year that I had Braves season tickets. I invited 14 of my friends on my birthday to come to a Braves game, and they were playing the Giants. And
Mm.
I said, "Oh, okay, when Barry Bonds comes up to bat, I will give you a free ticket to this game if you will join me standing up and turning your back on
Yeah.
Barry Bonds, because we know who the real home run champion is."
So yeah, I mean, basically, there's so few are from the Atlanta metro area because it's a newer kind of town.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
interesting. You came from Wisconsin, came from Ohio, and it's a real mixture. And now, as we're moving forward, so many years later, how diverse the Atlanta metro has become.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's one thing I love about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really excelled after the Olympics, but we know all those legends who got the Olympics here, and it just exploded after that.
Right, right.
Incredible, very inspirational. You got a lot of other historical ideas woven into the new album, and you have a track about German Jewish refugees. How did
Well,
that all come up?
well, the story of the MS St. Louis is known to most of my Jewish friends and is also almost completely unknown to everyone else. The MS St. Louis was a German ship out of Hamburg that in 1939 sought to bring 900 Jewish refugees, women, men, children, entire families, from Germany at the beginning of World War II, when it was apparent that these people were destined for the final solution, as they so coldly called it. And it sailed across the Atlantic, and its first stop was Cuba, and they were turned away from Cuba. They went to
Right.
Canada. Canada turned them away.
Mm.
And then they came to the United States as the last and final stop, and they were turned away. And so they went back to Germany. And I often look to history when I'm trying to give some perspective to contemporary issues. And so that by the time people hear the story of the turning away of this group of people in peril for their lives, um, if you dare to say, well, look around.
Yeah.
There's this a situation not completely dissimilar is going on right now. And one of the things that I have been really trying to do for decades now is address the kind of music that first attracted me. I mean, here was an 11-year-old kid hearing folk music that was connected to the civil rights movement. This was the grand social movement of the day. Um, how do you deal with social and political um, issues and give it new insight? I don't, because basically, why should anybody care what I think? I'm just a guy with a banjo and a guitar, but give us a new idea. And how often does that happen? So it's one of the trickiest things and one of the most satisfying things when I think that maybe I've come close to doing that. And MS St. Louis was one way of saying, do we learn things from history, or are we doomed to repeat it again and again? And of course, we live in a time now where everybody thinks everything is happening for the very first time, and there has never been income inequality before,
Hmm.
and there has never been, racism before, and there's never been immigration issues before. Whereas almost every one of us who comes from another ancestors came from another part of the world dealt with that in our own way in the course of our family history. So anyway, the MS St. Louis, yeah, it's a story worth knowing. The other one, of course, that has an Atlanta connection is the one Peter Norman.
Yes, yes, that's
I
an interesting
remember
story.
I was a kid who discovered quite by accident at age 14, my freshman year of high school, that I was a pretty decent middle, and long distance runner. So I was on the cross country team, which is like the bottom rung of high school athletic coolness. I mean, your mom even doesn't come to cross country meets. But but by the time the track, you know, I was 2 years into understanding. I knew the metrics. I knew what a good time was. I knew what a good
Sure.
distance was. I knew what a good height was. And along come the Olympics. So I'm invested in this in 1968. And in 68, it was, Bob Beamon breaking the long jump record by 2 feet. I mean, that's
Mm.
just like unbelievable.
That's incredible.
And then, of course, there was Tommy Smith and John Carlos on the awards stand following the 200-meter finals. And in October of 2018, because the Summer Olympic Games were actually in October of 1968.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good time to
Um,
have it. A little cooler.
and on the front page of the AJC is this photograph, probably the most iconic sports photograph that of our lifetime, of Tommy Smith and John Carlos with their fists raised. And it was the
Right.
50th anniversary of that event. And in the story, it said, whoa, Tommy Smith lives in Stone Mountain, where I
Hmm.
live. And I thought, oh, well, that's the connection. And embarrassingly, for the first time, I noticed, wait a minute, there's a third guy here.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I've never noticed this before. And I wonder who this person is. And, it sounds like a John McCutcheon song. Um, and who better to write it?
Perfect.
So I did a bunch of research and I found it was this Australian guy who supported Smith and Carlos. In fact,
Yeah.
you'll notice in the photograph, they are barefoot and they have a fist raised,
That's very
the
yeah.
black glove on it. And in the locker room before the awards ceremony, Carlos and Smith talked to Norman and say, "This is what we're going to do." And he said, "Well, I support you, but raising the fist is kind of a black thing. How about if I just put your Olympians for Human Rights badge
Yeah.
on my jacket, and I will stand there and support you. And in the press afterwards, I will support you."
Yeah.
And Carlos says, "Damn, I forgot my gloves." And it was Peter Norman who said, "Well, one of you share the pair of gloves." So if you notice in the photograph, one is raising a right hand and one is raising a left hand.
Oh, interesting.
And they maintained a relationship for the rest of their lives. Carlos and Smith were pallbearers at Peter Norman's funeral and
Oh,
delivered eulogies. And even though he had the fastest qualifying time of the 72 Olympics, Peter Norman was not allowed to be on the Australian team. And the US team flew Norman and his wife as guests to Munich and
no.
feted them as heroes. They ran into Bob Moses, and Peter Norman said, "Oh, Mr. Moses, I'm a huge fan of yours." And Moses said, "No, we are
Yeah.
all fans of yours." So
Amazing.
I figured the guy deserved a song.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I love the line in the battle between right and wrong, there is no second place. It's just, yeah.
Every once in a while, you just get a gift
Yeah, yeah. It's just
line.
like, you feel like, oh, it doesn't really write itself, but you obviously have composed that, but it's just, yeah, it just
Well,
has that
actually,
connection.
one of the things I learned during the pandemic, and that one was actually written before the pandemic. That was one of the original pieces intended in 2020. But one of the things I really learned to do, and which really prompted the kind of tsunami of songs that have happened since I returned from Australia in 2020, was that notion of really being able to surrender. I do meditation every day, and
That's good.
um, there's a practice in which it doesn't work at all unless you surrender. Faith is like that, and songwriting is not unlike that
Mm.
either. I mean, there are many times when Paxton and I will have finished a song and we'll look back at it and and one of us will say, we're not this good.
Mm.
You know, we had to, we had to let go. Um, but yeah, you got to do the work and you got to prep the ground, uh, but and plant the seeds. Uh,
Right.
but the growing happens whether you're there or not.
So true, so true. I also, speaking about religion and things like that, Tikkun Olam
Uh,
has a very special meaning. Heal the world, as people might out there might not know. That's just it's a really wonderful track mentioning Rabbi Heschel and
oh yeah,
a concept that, many of us have grown up with.
it's yeah, I first learned about Tikkun Olam when I did an appearance with Michael Lerner
Yes,
many years ago, who had the magazine Tikkun. And then
exactly.
when I did the Pete Seeger album, I did a Kickstarter thing, and one of the premiums was writing a song, and a Jewish couple was celebrating their 50th anniversary, and they were saying, well, Tikkun Olam is very important to us and to our children, to our parents, to our entire community. And I said, well, I've heard the term, but talk to me about it. So I've been carrying it around for a while, and especially in these times when there is this shocking and alarming rise in anti-Semitism, I thought it was really critical for a non-Jew to talk about this and honor it. I hope I honored it, um,
Absolutely.
and just bring it out there so that people like who, as I did, said, "Well, tell me more about this," because in 3 minutes you can't explain something
Right.
as ancient
Deep as that.
and as important as Tikkun Olam. But thank
Yeah.
you. I'm glad it means something to you.
Oh, what a connection. Peter and I had talked about that years ago, and I remember Rabbi Lerner quite well. I think he passed not terribly long ago out of San
No,
Francisco, I believe. It's
I
where he
think
was.
so.
Yeah. Wow.
And
It's
Rabbi Heschel, he was that wild-haired,
yeah.
white-bearded guy, often marching next to Martin Luther
Yeah.
King, and it's from him that I have found that I've got that beautiful term, praying with my feet,
Hmm.
which I
Yeah.
have used in a number of songs just because I think it's worth repeating.
It totally is. Yeah.
At Shabbat, I pray
Yeah.
in synagogue, and today here in the street.
Mm.
You bring it
Yeah.
out and wear it and walk around with it. That's when faith comes alive. I mean, it's again, Jimmy Carter. You
Yeah.
know, he wasn't doing it for the photographers.
Exactly. Very down to earth, very real, and keeping it real. Your title track is beautiful as well. You have a wonderful duet on that. How did you come
Uh,
to know Carrie? It's just you
well,
mesh so
Carrie and
well
I
on that.
have, the folk music world is a small world,
Oh
and
yeah.
especially if you're a survivor, as we both are,
Yeah.
we've somehow managed to deal with, you know, uh, the wackiness that is demanded if you're going to live your life being everybody else's free time. So we have known of one another. We've run into one another on the road. We've done several shows together, and I really love her attention to writing songs out of a spiritual foundation, which nobody else that I write with does, and few people performers who are able to talk about issues of faith and spirituality without making it feel creepy or that you're somehow going to be proselytized to. So she and I started writing. She was the second person I started writing with, and the second album that I did during the pandemic was called Bucket List,
Right.
and I we swapped out albums that we had been working on, and in the next writing sessions, she said, it made me start thinking about my bucket list, and one of the things on my bucket list is walking the Camino de Santiago, which for your listeners is
Mm.
a 1,000-year-old, 500 mile. Well, there are actually many caminos, but the main one, the ancient one, is the way called the French Way. Starts in the Pyrenees of southwestern France, and all of the caminos end up in Santiago de Compostela, which is in the northwest part of Spain. And everybody, from popes to kings to St. Francis have walked this. Um, and I said, me too. My wife has been talking about doing the Camino for as long as I've known her. So we started reading about it and watching movies. Martin Sheen has a movie called The Way
Hmm.
about him,
When that came out.
about his character walks the Camino. Um, and the terminus point, of course, is Santiago de Compostela, where purportedly the bones of the Apostle James are interred. And Santiago, of course, means St. James, and Compostela translates to Field of Stars. And Carrie said, "Well, I can't wait for you to take your Camino so we can write about it." I said, "Carrie, we're songwriters. We make up crap all the time."
Yeah, you don't have to be accurate.
And so we decided to write about four very different people walking the Camino for four very different reasons. And I said, and Carrie, Compostela, Field of Stars, come on. We got to
Yeah.
write a song called Field of Stars. It's just too beautiful to leave out there all on its own. And and it's really one of my favorite songs on the recording. I invited Carrie to sing the second verse because it obviously had to be sung by a woman. Um, but and our voices work really well together, and it was
Yeah.
fun to do it. And it's Field of Stars is just one of those songs that it's hard to explain, but it's just really I love singing it. It tells such an interesting story, four different stories that are absolutely connected by the end. And I'm just thrilled to get it. I thought about holding it for the album that's inevitably going to be coming out of my own Camino, starting this May. But I just wanted to get it out there. It was a selfish pleasure.
Yeah, and but that's the title track. That's your theme, and I really enjoyed that cover. How did you come up with that for the album? It's very, very beautiful photography.
There's a woman named Maureen Breyer who has done all my uh, album artwork for many years, and I love working with her. I love what she comes up with. And I told her the idea that I had and sent her some stuff I'd found on the internet, this sort of thing, and she came up with that image among a dozen others, and I was immediately drawn to that, and I said, "That's absolutely it." And she said, "Oh, I hoped you'd pick that one."
Good, good. Yeah, they're very eye-catching. Of course, the album covers as well. Yeah, just like Bucket List and all these others. It's just it really does. It's an eye catcher for sure. So you're taking it out on the road.
I
You're
am.
already,
I am.
yeah.
I every January for over 40 years now, I have done a tour out in California, and it's really fun. It's really easy. It's almost Pavlovian now. People out in California say, "Oh, it's January. McCutcheon must be coming." Um, and I'm visiting a lot of these places for the, you know, 30th or 40th time. And it's really a wonderful community that has built up around these, and I'm really eager to take this out there. I should say that I originally was going to do this tour with Paxton, and it
Mm,
was booked and advertised as one with Tom, and then Tom had a couple of on his last couple of little weekend trips he took. He was hospitalized at the end of each
mm.
one. He's recovered, but he at 87 he said he finally decided to listen to his doctor, his daughters, and his body, and say,
Yeah,
"I think I'm done."
yeah, yeah.
So
And
I
when,
regret that because I love Tom. We love being together. I love performing with him, and I love the songs we get to perform. together, but we can't do everything that we hope for in this life. So I got to go out there on my own again.
Oh,
I've done
good.
it before.
Yeah. And you go all you from San Diego to San Francisco? Is it the whole seaboard?
I'm not doing Southern California this time. I used to do, oh geez, years ago, I would be out for almost a month, and I would do the Northwest, Northern California, which has countless places you can play, and Southern California as well. And these days, I'm just doing Northern California, and I'll be out there for 10 days, playing almost every day. And I do that because I'm old and cranky, and
Yeah.
I like being home, and I hate being away.
Yeah, no place like home and Eddie's Attic. I always promote them and just the
Well,
amazing
and I'll be
acts.
there doing my annual Eddie's Attic CD release party in the first weekend of January, and then up to the Craddock Center up in Cherry Log, which is my wife and I have a cabin up in Cherry Log, and
Oh,
the Craddock Center was founded by my old friend Reverend Fred Craddock, um, who taught at Candler for many years. He was probably the most revered homilist in the Protestant world. And he started the Craddock Center, so I go out there and do a little celebration of that and him and his life every year. So
great.
that's
Yeah.
that's kind of my hometown weekend. My hometown in the Atlanta area, and my hometown up in North Georgia.
And a good time to do it when the weather finally cools off. Hopefully not too cold. We're supposed to
Oh,
be.
remember, I'm from
Yeah.
Wisconsin. I'm used
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
this
that's
stuff.
true. Yeah. It's always in your blood anyway. I mean, I kind of have that from being in Ohio, but I've been here many decades. So it's
Oh,
like,
yeah. I mean, driving in the snow is like it's in my DNA.
oh gosh.
But I know I'm surrounded by people who have no idea how to do it. So I
Oh
just
my
stay.
gosh. Yeah, it was always that. I was like, no, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't trust anybody else out there. They're all gonna just slide into me. It's like,
Well, and Snowmageddon proved that.
oh my gosh. Yeah, I was telling the story how I basically stayed at work because I heard about what happened here in 1982. And I was
Mhm.
like, the same thing's gonna happen. And sure enough, I was right. And I'm so glad I didn't go out there. I just stayed at work,
Oh, well,
slept
I had taken
overnight.
my wife to the airport, and she had to go to speak at a conference, and she was on the last flight out before the airport closed down,
Oh,
and the Sky Cats out there know me really well. And so I'm sitting around chatting with these guys because for a change, I'm not going anywhere. I'm putting my wife on a plane, and there's nobody coming. So one of them says, "Well, I guess I better go home because I have to drive home in the midst of all these idiots." And I thought,
yeah.
"Oh, right. I'm not worried about getting home myself. I'm worried about being on the road with a whole bunch of people who don't know how to drive in the snow." So I
Yeah.
made it home though. I drove all back roads and little side streets. But yeah, going to California in January is,
Good.
I've never had a gig snowed out in
Good.
40 years.
Yeah.
But I look forward to it. I'm performing. The pandemic cured me of having to run the same kind of program I did when I was 25.
Mm.
So I'm performing about half as much as I used to, which makes it special.
Yeah, that's
I've got so
okay.
many friends out on the road now that I'm going to a lot of places I've gone for many years. So it's nice to get out there and get limber again and share a bunch of new songs with people.
Yeah, there's a real joy in that as well, I'm sure. But it's okay to slow down, but you're still doing it. I mean, even
Yeah,
Bruce Springsteen even cut some minutes out of his 5 hour long shows or whatever those are.
yeah, yeah.
It's like so somebody, yeah, you do have to definitely be use some common sense there as well. So the new album, it's available on CD. Do you have vinyl as well? And
I do not have vinyl, unfortunately, but it's available for digital download in all the usual places. But what's interesting about from my website, which is folkmusic.com, believe it or not,
yeah,
is that I hate MP3s.
yeah, compression.
And
It's just yeah,
MP3s is one of the reasons that vinyl is so popular again
yeah.
today, because our kids grew up with MP3s, and then all of a sudden they pull out a vinyl and they're hearing full spectrum audio and analog, and they go, oh, so this is what music is supposed to sound like.
Hmm.
So I've always thought, the convenience of MP3s is that they're smaller, they're compressed
Oh yeah.
like crazy, and they take up less space on your listening device. But why go to the bother of going to one of the best studios in the world, working with one of the best engineers in the world, and then squashing down the sound so it sounds crappy? So I offer downloads of MP3s if you want it, or WAV files, which is the full spectrum audio, so that you can actually listen to it as we intended.
Yeah, that's the closest thing because you could take it with you. That's
Yeah.
the great thing. You could take it with you. It's convenient. Obviously, vinyl not so, but vinyl's beautiful with all the artwork and
The
everything. That
art, oh
was
yeah, the
yeah.
artwork. It's the one, and again, for people who, I was talking with someone just last night. The whole concept of the album
Yeah, I know. That
is
was an art that
just
was
such a
so big.
different world. I mean, I remember the days when we would have sessions of sequencing
Yes.
because you want to have the last song on the first side be something that made you want to turn the album over and listen to the second side because you actually had to exert some energy. Imagine.
Yeah.
But also the way that you could tuck little gems in an album, stuff you knew was never going to get any airplay, but that you loved and you wanted to share with people. And everybody out there of an age has a song
Yeah.
that they really love that they discovered buried deep in some track on an album that was never going to be on the radio, was never going to be covered, but it's your favorite song from the album. And my grandkids, their mother said, "Well, we're going to sit down and listen to the entire album." I go, "What? We want a
Yeah.
playlist. We have to listen to the same person sing all these songs. Oh, it's Poppy. Sure, we'll do that." But
Yeah.
yeah, the whole notion that this is a collection of songs that hopefully tells a story that's greater than the sum of its parts, and it's always the way I've approached albums. And sometimes it's been successful, and sometimes not as much. But you know, if I struck out 7 times out of 10 in the major leagues, I'd be a shoe-in for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So you have
Well,
you have to have some kind of a perspective that not everybody's going to get what you're trying to do or say, but somewhere there's going to be somebody who says, "Oh,
yeah.
oh, I see the story that's going on here."
Beautiful. Very well said. Well, thanks for dropping by, as always. I think this
Yeah, it's
was number
always great to
four.
talk to you.
Yeah.
I look forward to doing it in person again sometime.
Yeah. We'll
I
have to
think the
meet up at
first time was in
Eddie's.
person, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we did a video package on you,
At his attic, right?
which is now on my YouTube channel,
Oh, I
originally.
have I have to go back and look and
Yeah.
see how young I looked back then.
I'm losing track when we did that. It's
That was
like
for the
that.
Pete Seeger album, so it would have
Yeah.
been like 2018 or early 19.
Like something
Because that
like
was his
definitely.
100th
Yeah.
birthday. Yeah. Well,
I,
thanks for all you do, Bob,
yeah.
and thanks for
Yeah.
making time to include this old folk singer in your travels.
Yeah, you had started this with me on this journey. I started this over 4 years ago now, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun, and I love hearing about how the sauce is made, the secret to the sauce. So it's always a lot of fun, and I hope to see you at Eddie's. Take care. Happy New Year.
Bye bye.
Bye. That was a lot of fun. And John goes back now a couple of years with me. So, but he's been around, and 45 albums is quite an accomplishment. Thanks for joining me. I hope to have a lot more out here in 2025. Have a great, happy, healthy new year and many years to come as well. I'm hoping and praying that for myself as well. If some folks out there know what I mean, little bit of inside information there. Anyhow, hope you have a great 2025. Thank you.